All right, assalamu alaikum everyone. Good morning. So I'm really pleased to chair this session, a session that I can relate to. So I teach Islamic studies at Georgetown University in the Department of Theology and Religious Studies. So I'm hoping that we have a great discussion, great panel, right? So the title of our panel is Quranic Studies, Hadith, and Islamic Textual Traditions. So basically, sacred texts of Islam. And we will begin with Ömer Faruk Akman of ISAM, right, Center for Islamic Studies. And the title of our paper for the session, From Classical Exegesis to Modern Interpretation, an analysis of war and peace in Sayyid Hussein Nasr's Study Quran. And those of you who don't know, Study Quran is actually one of the most comprehensive study in English on the Quran. So basically, the collection of many Quran tafsirs, and so it's a major study, and I'm pleased to Omar doing this presentation. Yes.
بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. أما بعد, brothers and sisters, as Mahmoud told, my presentation is going to be about Sayyid Hussein Nasr's last translation of Quran to English, the study Quran. My presentation is going to be four parts. First part, I will introduce the text and talk about it and its methodology. Secondly, I will give the classical understanding and the classical paradigm about jihad. Classical exegesis were explaining jihad verses. Thirdly, I will give the modern translations of the Quran to English and what is the paradigm shift and how it differs from the classical paradigm. And lastly, I will give how the Nasr's text, Nasr's work, explain and how it take into account the verses relating to jihad. Let's start with the first part. The study Quran was published in 2015. It's a multilingual translation and commentary. The text was written by 5 persons, led by the Sayyid Hussein Nasr, and he is the general editor of the text. It is a 3-part. The text is 3-part. First part is translations of the verses. Second part is the commentary section, and the third part is consists of 15 distinct articles written by scholars like Velid Salih, William Chittick, Hamza Yusuf, and Caner Dağlı about the several topics in Islam. The most important part of the sides of the text is it feels like in English Islamic literature, which lacks a complete tafsir. There is not an English tafsir which is written in English. There are translations, Mevdudi or Ibn Kesir, etc. But there is not an English tafsir till now. As a methodology, Nasr approached the Quran from a perennialist and eternal wisdom perspective. To show how Muslims have authentically understood the Quran throughout history, he intentionally excludes the modernist and fundamentalist interpretations and tendencies that have appeared in the last 2 centuries. As I told, giving a huge attention to the classical tradition and excluding the modernist and fundamentalist tendencies. In the second part, I will talk about jihad, how the classical exegetes talk about it. As you see on the table, Muqatil, Taberi, Zemasheri, Kurtubi, and Ibn Kesir, a highly representative table of the classical exegesis. First of all, they are define fitna in the jihad verses, like in the Baqarah 190, 91, 92, 93. وَقَاتِلُهُمْ حَتَّى لَا تَكُونَ فِتْنَةٌ. They define fitna in this world as shirk and disbelief, which is polytheism and disbelief. Almost all of the classical exegesis, tafsir, explain fitna like this. till what we are going to fight, till disbelief is erased from the earth. Also, the second thing, reason is disbelief. In the same group of verses, we see that وَقَاتِلُوا حَتَّى لَا تَكُونَ فِتْنَةٌ وَيَكُونَ الدِّينُ لِلَّهِ, and in another verse وَيَكُونَ الدِّينُ كُلُّهُ لِلَّهِ, till the religion becomes for God completely. Also, in the same tafasir, in the same exegesis, we see that if they desist in the same group of the verse, فَإِنْ انْتَهَوْا فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ فَإِنْ انْتَهَوْا فَلَا عُدْوَانَ إِلَّا عَلَى الظَّالِمِينَ. If they stop, if they desist, we are not going to fight against them, we are not going to perform jihad against non-Muslims. But if they desist from what? Classical exegesis say that if they desist from disbelief, if they desist from polytheism, idolatry, so it is not enough for them to desist from their fighting against Muslims, but they have to desist from their disbelief, shirk also. This is an important side of the classical exegesis. Purpose of war, fight i'la'i kalimatullah, fight until to shirk erased from the earth, as you see on the table. To sum up the second part, definition of fitna is shirk and kufr, disbelief and polytheism, and if they have desisting from war and desisting from the disbelief. In the third part, Marmaduke Piktel, Yusuf Ali, Abdul Halim, Mustafa Khattab, Muhammad Asad, we see a huge paradigm shift here. Definition of fitna becomes persecution, oppression to move here. We don't see any more disbelief or shirk, etc. Interpretation of desisting becomes completely desisting from hostility, desisting from persecuting Muslims, desisting from فَلَا عُدْوَانَ إِلَّا عَلَى الظَّالِمِينَ. Zalimin here were being exegeted in classical period as zalimin, mushrikeen, but here zalimin only who persecute Muslims, as you see, willfully wrongdoers, etc., or aggressors, etc. So I want to elaborate Asad's case a little bit. Asad says that Tawbah 5, which is called sword verse, certainly does not imply an alternative of conversion or death, as some of the critics of Islam choose to assume. As you know, in Tawbah 5, فإذا انسلخ الأشهر الحرم فاقتلوا المشركين حيث وجدتموهم إلى آخر الآية. Asad says that there is no, if you convert to Islam, become Muslim, or we are going to fight you. Asad says there is no situation here like this, but he says, after the critics of Islam says this, but as I showed you a little just a second ago, classical paradigm almost completely say this. So Asad's assumption goes to almost all the classical mufassirin. I want to draw your attention to this. Ultimately, we can say that in the modern era, as Western civilization strengthened and Islamic civilization weakened, Muslim thinkers increasingly adopted an apologetic attitude, which is clearly reflected in this modern defensive translations of the Quran. So to sum up the second and third tables, classical definition of fitna was disbelief and polytheism were being done by eliminating of shirk and desisting not only from war but also from disbelief. We see a paradigm shift in the modern era. Fitna is started to be defined as oppression. War is for self-defense and justice against aggressors. Desisting only from war. If they stop fighting you, we are not jihading. We are not performing jihad anymore against you. When we come to Nasr's approach, his approach is, I think, valuable. Nasr and his team, I mean, unlike many modern apologetic translations, those who simply cut ties with the classical views to fit today's paradigms, Nasr actively opposes these revisionist tendencies. He accurately conveys the harsh views of the classical type. He quotes scholars like Taberi, Ibn Kathir, Zamanshari, etc., and says that they define fitna as idolatry. However, he is not as absolute as those classical scholars, and he certainly is not as strict pacifist as the modern defensive translators, as I showed you their names here. What he is doing after respectfully quoting the classical tradition, Nasr points out for the contemporary reader that different readings are also possible, He highlights classical alternative reasoning like the Razi. Razi, for example, adds some restrictive comments, and Nasafi does that for the classical tradition to show that one can struggle simply until Muslims are not persecuted for their religion. Nasr argues that the true ultimate goal of jihad in the Quran is cessation of physical warfare and the establishment of peace and religious freedom. And he also thinks that forced conversion, ihtida, is not the goal of jihad. He specifically notes that resisting refers to the enemy stopping physical aggression as the modern translation. To conclude, Nasr's approach is unique because he supports defensive jihad while staying deeply respectful for the classical tradition. Unlike many other modern Quran translations, he is not apologetic and doesn't simply discard the old views of ulama and mufassirin to fit today's paradigm. Instead, he quotes the classical scholars first and then explains his views to say that the other readings are also possible. He is not as pacifist as other modern writers like Muhammad Asad or Yusuf Ali as Abu Halim, who explain their ideas in their footnotes in their Quran translations. Also, he is not pacifist as they, and he honored the tradition while offering a meaningful perspective for today. At the end of the, I told you about this. The goal of jihad is defensive. As a conclusion, I want to show you the three slots from the definitions of the fitna in classical paradigm and modern paradigm and Nasr's synthesis. One is jihad is being done for eliminating shirk, and secondly, jihad is being done for oppression, to block oppression. And Nasr comes with a unique idea. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. This is really a thoughtful perspective on studying Quran, right? So, I met Nasr a few times, and maybe the most important aspect of his work is he's known to be very traditional and not really to buy everything that is offered in the modern context, right? So hopefully when we have when we finish all the panels, right, we can have more discussion.
Sure.
And hopefully we have questions. Sure. All right. So now we will turn to our second presentation. And let me see just. And remember, everyone has 10 minutes. So the idea is really to stick to our time, and so then we can have some time after the presentation for discussions and questions. All right. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. All right. So our next question is Nur Seda Shadoğlu from Marmara University, and the title of her presentation is "The Hydrological Cycle in Land in the Context of Al-Zumar 39:21." So this is actually right the 21st verse of the Quran in Surah Al-Zumar. So hopefully Luciana will give us more context about what this verse is about and the implications into its context. All right. Now we are in your hands.
Ben göremiyorum da.
Ben görmüyorum başladım.
Slideshow. Şehrin hemen yanında.
Professor and participants, I represent my study title, The Hydrological Cycle in the context of Al-Zumar 21. Water is one of the most familiar and indispensable elements of life, yet its journey through nature is extraordinary. Today we will trace this remarkable movement through Al-Zumar 21, inshallah. The study aims to highlight the harmony between Al-Zumar 21 and the process known today as the water cycle. It also draws attention to the position and relevance of the Quranic wording in describing this process. Methodologically, it follows a qualitative, text-centered, and conceptual approach. Al-Zumar 21 is a central verse, supported by selected related verses and limited tafsir sources. In this section, I will briefly explain the main Quranic terms related to water and rainfall. Ma is the general word for water. Ghayth refers to beneficial, life-giving rain, while matar is a more general term for rainfall. Wabil describes heavy rain. Watak points to raindrops emerging from clouds. And barat refers to hail as frozen precipitation. In some verses, rainfall is also connected with risk, meaning provision, and rahmah, meaning with mercy. Together, these terms show that Quran speaks of water in a rich and meaningful way. Before Azwan 21, some scientific features of water should be briefly mentioned. Water is made of 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. Although its formula H2O is very simple, water has remarkable properties. For example, hydrogen is flammable and oxygen supports combustion, but water itself is not flammable and can extinguish fire. Water is also a polar molecule, and this allows water molecules to form hydrogen bonds. These bonds explain many of water's special properties. For example, ice flows on liquid water, which helps protect aquatic life in cold environments. Hydrogen bonds also give water cohesion and adhesion. Cohesion keeps water molecules together, while adhesion helps water cling to tank vessel walls. Evaporation from the leaves also supports this upward movement against gravity. This will become clearer when we discuss the role of plants in the water cycle. Another important point is fresh water. Human beings can drink and directly use only fresh water, yet most of Earth's water is salty and only about 3% is fresh water. Even this small amount is not fully accessible. The Quran also draws attention to this distinction between fresh and salty water. In Chapter 12, it says, "The 2 seas are not alike. One is fresh, thirst quenching, and pleasant to drink. The other is salty and bitter." This is significant because the water cycle makes limited fresh water available again and again. This brings us to hydrological cycle. Hydrology is the science that studies the distribution, movement, and properties of water on Earth. Although the total amount of water on Earth remains nearly constant, water is always moving, and this continuous movement is called hydrological cycle. This diagram shows the main processes of the cycle. Water evaporates from oceans, seas, lakes, rivers, and soil through solar energy. Plants also release water vapor through transpiration. Together, these are called evapotranspiration. As vapor rises and cools, it condenses and forms clouds. When droplets become heavy enough, water returns to the earth as rain, snow, or hail. Some of this water flows over the surface and returns to rivers and seas, while another part infiltrates the soil and recharges groundwater. In this way, water continuously moves through an ordered and renewing system. Now we come to the main verse of the study, Azimah 21. It says, "Do you not see that Allah sends down rain from the sky and makes it flow as springs in the earth? Then He produces thereby crops of varying colors. Then they dry, and you see them turn yellow. Then He makes them debris. Indeed, in that is a reminder for those of understanding." This verse forms the main framework of my discussion. In the following part, I will consider it together with related Quranic verses in 5 stages. The first stage is sending down water from the sky. This stage can be better understood through An-Nur 43, which describes the formation and movement of clouds. It says, "Do you not see that Allah drives clouds and then He brings them together? Then He makes them into a mass, and you see the rain emerge from within it." As we see in the diagram, the process begins with evaporation. The verse then says, "Yuzji sahaba." In the next sequence, Yuzji is explained as the movement of something light or slight. This fits the early stage where water vapor and small cloud particles are being moved. As vapor rises into cooler layers, it condenses into tiny droplets. The word sahab then indicates that these accumulated elements form clouds, which are carried by the winds. The verse continues with يُؤَلِّفُ بَيْنَهُ, meaning that scattered clouds are brought together in harmony and order. Then comes يَجْعَلُهُ رُكَامًا, meaning that they are made into a piled up mass, pointing to dense cloud formation. Finally, فَتَرَى الْوَقَّ يَخْرُجُ مِنْ خِلَالِهِ, means that rain emerges from within them. In other words, When clouds become dense and heavy enough and atmospheric conditions are suitable, the condensed droplets fall as precipitation. Another related passage is found in Surah An-Naba, verses 13 to 15. It says, "And we made a burning lamp and sent down pouring water from the rain clouds, that we might bring forth thereby rain and vegetation." The key term here is al-mu'sirat, which refers to clouds releasing water and carries the sense of pressing and squeezing. Ma'an thajjajan then describes water pouring abundantly. The passage also mentions Sirajan Wahajan, a burning lamp, referring to the sun as a source of intense heat and light. What is striking is the order. The sun is mentioned before the descending order. This may point to its central role in the cycle, since solar energy is one of the main driving forces of the water cycle. The second stage is the storage of rainwater. After water is sent down from the sky, Allah makes it flow as springs in the earth. The word sudu suggests following path, while yanabia refers to springs or underground water sources. This indicates that rainwater does not remain on the surface. Part of it enters the soil and recharges underground reservoirs. In modern hydrology, this corresponds to infiltration and groundwater recharge. Water is also stored in reservoirs such as snow and ice, soil moisture, groundwater, lakes, rivers, and the atmosphere. Its residence time varies greatly from a few days in the atmosphere to thousands of years in groundwater. So the water cycle is also a system of storage. This makes the expression in Al-Zumar 21 especially meaningful because it connects rainfall with the hidden storage of water within the earth. Another related verse is Al-Mu'minun 18. It says, "And we sent down water from the sky in due measure and settled it in the earth, and surely we are able to take it away." The verse adds two important ideas. First, water is sent down in due measure, which points to balance and proportion. Second, it is settled in the earth, which again emphasizes storage. In fact, the same as water rises from the seas, ocean, and lakes, salt and other dissolved substances remain behind. When the vapor condenses and returns to the earth, fresh water is produced. In this sense, the cycle functions as a natural process of purification. In Al-Jumar 21, plants are not only the result of water, they also take part in the cycle. Through transpiration, they release water vapor into the atmosphere. Since much usable fresh water is stored underground, plants act like natural drilling machines, drawing hidden water upward. The next stage is the drying and yellowing of plants. As the days become shorter and temperatures fall, chlorophyll production slows down and yellow and orange pigments become visible. When water becomes less available in the soil, plants reduce water loss by shedding their leaves. So this stage is not only about decline, it also shows how plants preserve water and energy and how the cycle prepares for renewal. The final stage is the formation of photon, that is, dry plants remain broken into pieces. At first, it may seem like an end, but in nature, it marks a new beginning. When leaves and plants remain exposed to the ground, they form leaf litter on the soil surface. So this stage is not only about decay, it is part of the cycle. In conclusion, as Martin presents water not as a single event, but as part of an essential, ordered, and continuous cycle. Modern hydrology helps us see this process more clearly, while the Quran draws attention to it through a powerful observational language. Finally, I would like to end with this verse. Say, if your water were to disappear, then who could bring your flowing water? This question leaves us with a simple but powerful reminder. Water is not something to be taken for granted. It is a blessing that sustains life and calls us to awareness, awe, and gratitude.
Thank you, Nusana. This was really interesting. I mean, as you know, so the Quran in modern context and science has been a major discussion, right? How to understand the Quran in modern context, in the context of science, and this is actually a very good example of how we can engage with some of the verses in the Quran. And the other thing is, remember that roughly 1/3 of the Quran is about creation. So the Quran constantly really engages with the creation, but as a reference to God, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So hopefully can we have more discussion about your presentation. Thank you for being mindful of the time. All right. So now we will turn to our next presentation. So I'm delighted to introduce Mohammed Sofu as a doctoral student at the University of Münster, Germany. And the title of the presentation is Translations of a Translation, Jami's Persian 40 Hadith Collection, and it is two Turkish translations. So Jami, Maulana Abdurrahman Jami is a medieval scholar, produced again a prolific writer, and wrote many of his work in Persian, in Farsi. So what's interesting, just to highlight, that there has been remarkable interactions between the Persian-speaking world and the Turkish-speaking world. Remember, Turks, they actually had their engagement with Islam through the Persian-speaking world. That's why some of the lexicons, the word that we use in Turkish, they are not Arabic, but they come from Persian because of the interaction with the Persian-speaking world. Some of the examples are namaz, right? We don't say, in Turkish, it's commonly said namaz instead of salah. Instead of rasul, we say peygamber. It comes in actually Persian words. And abdest is another one, yes, a kind of and that's so it's nice to have a Persian-speaking literature as part of our discussion. The reason I mentioned this because, especially in the English-speaking world, there are lots of emphasis on Arabic classics. So I think, especially in the context of the Ottomans, we see lots of engagement with the Persian-speaking world too. So yes, Mohammed, we are in your hands.
Good morning. Thank you for the introduction. And thank you all for being here. It's a pleasure for me to share my research with you. This presentation is part of my PhD project, which focuses on inner Islamic knowledge transfer in the context of Arabic, Persian, Ottoman translations of Hadith literature. It's also connected to the DFG-funded research group, TransLab, which investigates translation processes between Arabic, Persian, and Ottoman in the early modern period from 1400 to 1750. The central aspect of the project is the systematic study of manuscripts, not only in terms of their textual content, but also with regard to their material features, readership, and transmission contexts. Within this framework, I am examining Abdurrahman Jami's Persian 40 Hadith collection, Chihil Hadith, and its 9 translations. Today, I will focus on 2 of these translations, those by Nabi and an anonymous translation. The reason why I selected Jami's collection of 40 hadiths is that it was the most frequently translated hadith collection between 1400 and 1750. When comparing other renowned hadith works, we find that Al-Bukhari's Jami' Sahih, for example, has at least 1,300 manuscripts in Turkey alone, but no translations. Similarly, Muslim's Jami' Sahih has at least 250 manuscripts, but no translations. And other well-known hadith books also remain untranslated. This suggests that hadith works were read in their original language. Given this context, one might ask why collections of 40 hadith were frequently compiled and sometimes translated. The answer lies in the motivational hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad, which encouraged the compilation of 40 hadith. For example, the following hadith can be cited: "Whoever safeguards for my ummah 40 hadiths concerning the teachings of her faith, God will raise him on the day of reckoning as a learned and knowledgeable person." Or in another hadith, raise him among the community of scholars and theologians. The hadiths compiled in Chihil hadith mostly address moral themes, making them universally appealing. They cover topics such as keeping promises, showing kindness, being merciful, wishing well for others, and being helpful. The hadiths in the collection are brief, consisting of at least 2 words, but no more than 9. Today, 61 extant manuscripts of Chilean hadith and 52 copies of its translations are known, including 16 by Nabi and 2 by the anonymous translator. Over a span of 250 years, Chilean hadith was translated 9 times, with all translations rendered in verse form. Nearly all translators were literary figures seeking to showcase their poetic skills by crafting naziras, meaning imitations, that reflected and engaged with Jami's original work. In classical Ottoman poetry, one of the most common ways for a poet to demonstrate skill was by imitating well-known works, often by composing a poetic response in the same meter, rhyme, and style. This was not mere imitation, but a recognized and integral part of poetic creation. Writing naziras served to refine one's craft, engage in poetic competition, and display literary skills. Before turning to the works, let us first take a brief look at the authors, starting with Jami, the Persian poet, scholar, and Naqshbandi Sufi who was born in Jami near Herat in 1414. He was a renowned figure, well known even among the Ottomans, and his Chilean hadith was completed in 1481, and he passed away in Herat in 1492. Nabi was born in 1642 in Wuhan, today's Urfa. He became one of the key representatives of Ottoman didactic poetry, writing in both Ottoman Turkish and Persian. In 1674, he produced the translation of Jami's Chilean and passed away in Istanbul in 1712. The third work is an anonymous Ottoman translation. It's undated, and today only 2 manuscript copies of this translation are known. Before looking at the preface of the translators, I'd like to mention the preface of the book I once read. It consisted of 2 sentences. The author was like, Al-Muqaddimah Ahad Iqbal Safa. The prefaces, no one reads them, just turn the page. However, I did not turn the page, I read them, and this is exactly the approach we take in TransLab. Prefaces are treated as key sources and examined systematically in order to understand translation practices, contexts, and intention. In his preface, Jami highlights the significance of hadith, emphasizing their divine origin, and presents his work as a means to facilitate understanding and memorization. Through this work, Jami expresses his hope to be recognized as a scholar on the day of resurrection. The work itself is written in verse, while the preface is composed in prose. Nabi's prose preface presents hadith as a guide and refers to the tradition of collecting 40 hadiths. He translates Jami work into Ottoman Turkish to reach a wider audience and ends with a modest request for his readers' prayers. The anonymous translator's short prose preface states that he undertook the work at a friend's request. Unaware of Jami's authorship, he describes the text as the work of an eloquent Persian scholar, notes that his manuscript contained many errors and that no other copy was available. I will now turn to one example to show how different translators render the same hadith, with particular attention to meaning, lexical overlap, and style. The first hadith is Ad-Dainu Shaynuddin. Debt is a stain on religion. Jami translated it as, whoever desires their share of religion to be complete does not toil for worldly wealth. Do not scratch the face of religion with the claw of death, so the beauty of the face of religion does not diminish. Nabi translated it as, do not let the neck of your endeavor be enslaved to debts for the sake of worldly ornament. Whoever falls captive to the claw of death, the face of his religion becomes scratched. And the anonymous translator, whoever desires their share of religion to be complete does not endure hardship and toil for wealth. He does not cause sorrow with the claw of death, so that the beauty of the face of religion does not fade. In Jami's version, the meaning of the hadith is conveyed as a strong warning. Posing worldly wealth harms religion, and debt limits its integrity. Nabi, by contrast, shifts the emphasis. He brings in the idea of worldly ornament and describes human endeavor itself as being enslaved to debt. The core meaning remains the same, but he broadens its scope. The anonymous translator, however, stays much closer to Jami's formulation. The difference lies in how he renders the effect of debt. Rather than saying that religion is scratch, he simply describes debt as a cause of sorrow. So, Jami is more forceful, Nabi expands the meaning, and the anonymous translator remains more literal. And on this slide, we can see the number of common words. In this hadith, Jami and Nabi share only two words, deen and dain, which actually already appear in the hadith itself. By contrast, the anonymous translator borrows 9 words from Jami, kamal, bahra, deen and deen, and so on. Between Jami and Nabi, the total number of common words across all 40 hadiths is on average 2. And between Jami and the anonymous translator, the average is a bit more than 4, roughly double that of Nabi. Now, let's have a look at the style of the hadith. In Jami's version, the message is conveyed with strong poetic imagery. Religion is personified with a face that can be scratched, and death is imagined as a claw. The striking metaphor, scratch the face of religion with the claw of death, gives the warning both vividness and force. Nabi reshapes this imagery by introducing a new metaphor, the neck of one's endeavor enslaved to debt, thus expanding the picture. At the same time, he retains Jami's ideas of the claw and of religion as a face, combining them with his own addition. His style is more dramatic, layering new images onto Jami's foundation. The anonymous translator stays closer to Jami's imagery but softens its impact, presenting debt more as a cause of sorrow. So while Jami creates the original powerful picture, Nabi expands and intensifies it with additional metaphors, and the anonymous translator simple and didactic. Now coming to the conclusion, Jami's translation often goes beyond the original hadith and can be seen as an interpretation. He uses poetic and stylistic devices to strengthen the message and add nuance. His work seems to address readers who are interested not only in spiritual understanding, but also in literary expression. Nabi's translation is not the word-for-word rendering of Jami. Instead, he reworks the text, drawing on Jami's Persian version and expressing the meaning in his own way. The anonymous translator shows greater lexical overlap with Jami, often using many of the same words, while he adopts some of Jami's stylistic features. He also adds his own and reshapes the text in Ottoman Turkish. As for the role of hadith in pre-modern Anatolian society, the aim is to cultivate moral and religious values and guide behavior. The brevity of the text work make them practical and easy to use, while their clear language ensures accessibility. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Muhammad. It was beautiful. So, I mean, one question that we see again, one issue in Islamic studies, especially in the English-speaking world, we see the contribution of the Ottoman Turkish and the Persian-speaking world often is missed, and even if it is part, it is often part of the Middle Eastern studies or politics. But here we see, the idea of akhlaq, ethics, like morality. And this is actually the direction that where we can bring this literature into conversation, right? This is one of them, and the other one is just the challenge of translation. I think, like, let's say if you translate something from one language to another, right, and especially in the context of hadith and the Quran, really how you can capture the language, and we see kind of the nuances, right? That to what extent you can borrow the same words, right? And by it will always be a challenge. And the third one is I think just how their creativity is very impressive. The metaphors that they use, right? I mean, different metaphors, right? And this story needs to be told. right? The creativity of these scholars, these poets, right? It is missed. We are not familiar, right? I mean, if you just and again, how many people will be really familiar with the work of Nabi? Sadly, not many, right? So I'm glad that we do this study. And the last thing is another. I try to engage with the Persian-speaking world too as much as I can. Their motivation for producing work, right? So here's you referred that Jami in his introduction kind of makes a reference to the day of judgment and kind of this translation of the hadith. I mean, first it is out of their love for the Prophet, peace be upon him, right? So that this is really their motivation, at the peak of their career to write something to crown their scholarship with something that's related to the Prophet, right? So that because their approach was that if there is a work that doesn't mention the Prophet, what kind of a work? So there was, I mean, emotion is there. It's not kind of a rational endeavor, but you also see their love, kind of revealing their emotion for the Prophet. So this is another thing and then kind of the fact that I write this work, so I hope that it will help me for my salvation on the day of judgment. Just, I mean, while we do this work, just to also reflect on your own motivations. See what motivates you to produce a scholarship. That's really important to keep in mind. All right. So now we will turn to our last presentation, Muhammad Burak Bakr.
Yeah.
Yes, Muhammad of Princeton University. Again, a doctoral student in the Department of Near Eastern Studies. And the title of Muhammad's presentations, Anatomy of Being a Believer, Ibrahim al-Qurani on the superiority of imitation, taqlid, over ratiocination. All right.
Yeah, thank you very much. My title is Anatomy of Being a Believer, Ibrahim al-Qurani on the superiority of imitation over raciocination. And here the imitation refers to imitated belief, al-iman taqlidi, and raciocination refers to the faith that is rationally justified. There's no problem.
Do you have
No.
do you have for the what is the Arabic word that you will be using?
Another.
Okay, nazar.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
My presentation consists of two parts. In the first part, I will summarize Al-Qurani's idea on imitated belief, and this part will be more theoretical discussion. And in the second part, I will move to the practical side of the story by looking at the socio-historical conditions of this perspective, and I will share my argument based on these two observations. As a background, the validity of imitated belief has long been a point of contestation among Islamic theologians, and Qadi Abdul Jabbar defines imitation as the acceptance of the statement of someone else without demanding proof. Within the Mu'tazili theology, belief in God is therefore framed primarily as an epistemological obligation, according to which individuals are required to rationally justify their beliefs in order to be Muslim. By contrast, Al-Maturidi maintains that the fate of the imitator, Muqallid, is valid in opposition to Mu'tazili position. Similarly, early Sunni theologians generally affirm the validity of imitator belief while differing in the assessment of its epistemic status. The Ash'ari tradition presents a more complex picture. While some Ash'ari theologians accept imitation as valid but sinful due to neglect of rational inquiry, and others regard the imitator as unbeliever. In the 17th century, these debates are revisited in the thought of Ibrahim al-Qurani, who died in 1690. He is an Ash'ari theologian, Sufi, hadith scholar of the Ottoman Hijaz. And he developed a distinctive position. He not only affirms the validity of imitator belief, but also argues for superiority over rationally grounded faith. In the late 1650s, al-Qurani completed his commentary on a creedal poem written by his master al-Kushashi, whom he later succeeded. The Kushashi is his Sufi master. This commentary, Pastus Sabil, articulates his position on imitation, including in sources and conceptual interventions. According to Al-Quran, imitation is not the acceptance of another's statement, but it is submission, id'an, and certain affirmation produced by a divine light cast into the heart upon hearing the Prophet's call. And this light discloses the truth of what is affirmed. On this account, imitator faith is not epistemically derivative, but directly grounded on divine illumination. A central move in his argument is the distinction between perception and submission. Perception is idrak, you can say comprehension, apprehension, it doesn't matter, idrak, and the submission, idhan. Perception is a theoretical act that does not entail affirmation, tasdeeq, whereas affirmation is inseparable from submission according to Al-Quran. Thus, belief in God is not cognitive apprehension, but a state of submission, which he describes as psychological quality. And here's his first take. Being a believer is therefore not a result of epistemic judgment or predication of divine attributes, but the condition of being in submission to God. On this basis, Al-Qurani redefines imitation such that imitative belief becomes at least as legitimate as rationally grounded belief. He further specifies that rational inquiry is not universally obligatory, but required only for those who fail to attain firm affirmation at the initial moment of divine address. Thus, there are not two equal ways to believe. Rather, the primary mode of faith is reception of the initial divine light, and the believer who attains it is properly called imitator, muqallid, and rational argumentation arises only secondarily, when this illumination is absent. Within this framework, Al-Quran reconfigures the epistemic hierarchy between imitation and rational demonstration. He locates doubt not in imitation, but in demonstrative reasoning, belief, which remains open to dispute and refutation, unlike unveiled case. By contrast, the light cast into the heart produces firm conviction in matters of creed and occupies at least the same epistemic status as rational proof. Indeed, Al-Qurani says, the quote, as a stronger position than rational proofs, end of quote. Accordingly, Al-Qurani ultimately situates proof-based belief below imitation-based belief. So far, I summarized Al-Qurani's distinctive perspective on imitative belief. Now let's look at the practical side of his vision. The social historical context of Al-Qurani's discussion can be reconstructed through Al-Ayyashi's Ar-Rihatul Ayyashiyya. In this travelogue, he reports that certain madrasa-trained scholars accused Al-Kushashi, who is Al-Qurani's master, of heresy and of opposing As-Sanusi, who was a major post-15th century Ash'arite figure. And we know that As-Sanusi had a rational position towards imitative belief. He thought that rational justification is obligatory and imitation is insufficient for salvation, and the imitator is unbeliever. And this scholarly network indicates that As-Sanusi's rational position was part of Al-Qurani's intellectual repository. At the same time, Al-Ayyashi depicts Al-Qurani as maintaining close proximity to non-elite communities. He reportedly dressed like the common people, awam, renounced worldly rank, and lived among them rather than withdrawing. For him, the true Gnostic, true scholar, is one who lives among people, assists them, and shares in their concerns. When these elements are considered together, Al-Qurani's reconceptualization of imitation appears grounded in practice rather than abstract epistemology alone. His account reflects a Sufi orientation in which knowledge is inseparable from a cultivated state of being. Now, here's the argument. I argue that Al-Qurani's theory of imitation is inseparable from his mode of being and the habitus he cultivated. No less than As-Sanusi's theory reflects his intellectual formation. By inhabiting the lifestyle of the common people, he reconfigured the spatial and intellectual boundaries sustained by Mediterranean elites. His sensibilities and embodied practices enabled an intimate relation with non-elite communities, which informs his understanding of belief. From this perspective, imitation cannot be reduced to a theological disagreement over epistemic studies. It reflects different modes of related to knowledge, truth, and religious life. As-Sanusi's rejection of imitation reflects a Medresa-based formation grounded in instruction, abstraction, and rational discipline, whereas Al-Quran's defense of imitation emerges from proximity to common people, embodied ethical sensibilities, and a Sufi conception of knowledge as lived relation. Knowledge here is not merely possessed, but lived through dispositions and ways of being. Thus, belief cannot be evaluated solely through rational criteria, but must also account for the lived forms of religiosity through which truth is approached and sustained. Imitation, therefore, emerges not only as a theological category, but as a key to understanding the social, ethical, and anthropological dimensions of Islamic knowledge. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's very interesting, very provoking, right? So remember this the state of faith, right? What is a good faith or iman is a burning issue actually in Kalam. So right, who has a good belief, right? Who has a good iman, right? And then in the modern context, again, lots of emphasis that actually, faith, the process of faith is a rational thing, right? Is that basically it is this is A, this is B, right? And as a result, you have an iman. So I mean, your presentation actually reminds me of the hadith of the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, in which he says, if you really want to see a good belief, look at the. I don't know if you ever came across. Look at the iman of an old woman. So basically, the idea is that this old woman is not, a scholar, like a highly educated person, but somehow, despite, and then I think those who you in your circle, you see Muslim community, you will see there will be some, old people, maybe barely any education, but their commitment to faith is a very remarkable. So this is kind of, I think, linking to hadith of the Prophet, right? Another thing is actually, hopefully we'll have more discussion. This is, there are many scholars who make the point that this idea of coming to faith is not a rational thing. There are actually, although now this is almost the attributes of our modern context, meaning you debate, you convince people, and they become a faithful person. It's very rare actually where you can see when you see people coming to faith by a rational argument. Let's say you debate them, you convince them, hey, you are wrong. It's very, very rare. Although it is commonly kind of perceived that actually in order for you, I mean, if you listen to people, how the shift among the faith, let's say those who come to Islam, it is often, they have actually, it's often an experience. There's lots of emotions involved. Is that the point I want to make? It's not really kind of like intellectual arguments people they make. I mean, it is there, right? Which I think your presentation also don't deny it, but it is not the departure point. Hopefully, we'll get to have more. So I think we have the good thing. Thank you everyone for being mindful of our time. We have actually, roughly around 20 minutes. We can go even a little bit more. Just how about if we go in order and see, any comment? Let's begin with our first presentation. Nasr, the study Quran. Any reaction, reflection, comment? Yes, and please just tell us your name so that can everyone tell you who you are.
Munawar, I'm PhD candidate at Temple University. I have a scholarship from Turkish government, so I'm in the 6th year in Philadelphia before I graduated from Columbia University at the Department of Middle Eastern Studies. So I have a question for Anwar Hocam. So Thank you so much for your presentation. I don't have enough information about Sayyid Hussein Nasr's perspective, but I know he defends Sufism as the inner dimension of Islam. So I'm wondering how does Sayyid Nasr apply his metaphysical level to interpret fitna and war? Because you are talking about ethical path. So just, okay, the anti-revisionist and honors tradition, and the third one, the ethics path. But do you think an ethic and metaphysics are distinct terms in Sayyid Nasr interpretation, or just works together? How you can define?
Actually, the answer is here. Most of the English translators of Quran, sometimes they don't apply their own ideas to their translations. They just sometimes translate it literally. And in jihad, I looked some problematic topics like women issues and like had and ta'bir, etc., like cutting hands, etc. Some of the translators don't apply their own ideas to their translations, and they just translate verses literally. And in Nasr's idea and in Nasr's text, he is translating the verses which is not equitable with his own ideas, just translating and giving it to the readers. So I think because this is his translation of Quran and doesn't apply his own ideas and his own opinions in this text, maybe in other books, but here he doesn't represent himself with his text.
Any other comment about the presentation, question? Otherwise, I will ask you a question, people. You need to ask something. Yeah.
I have a very question. So,
Can you raise your voice?
yeah,
a little?
definitely. So my name is Muhammad.
So the online people, they can hear you, right? So
I am Muhammad. I am from India. I'm doing my MA in the University. So when we look into tafsir, classical tafsir, the idea is that when they give a meaning to a particular word, they should have some kind of a precedent for that word. Right? So when they mean by fitna that it is shirk, so methodologically speaking, they have some kind of precedent, either in Quran or in Hadith or in Arabic literature, where the fitna is actually meant as shirk. So this is the basic idea. Fitna, as a term used even in Islamic tradition, in fiqh tradition, I don't know, maybe sometimes in Quran, fitna is a politically charged term, which means that you are making a political coup or a kind of political revolution against the state. So how do this classical Mufassirin translate the word fitna in this very particular context into shirk? And what is their justification for it?
You are right, Mufassirin, when they write exegesis, they look first of all for two things: the literature, I mean, linguistic and etymological. How can I say? I mean, language books, and they look for Ibn Faris, Ibn Sa'd al-Du'ali, etc. And secondly, they look for narration books. If there is a evidence for their ideas from these two kind of books, they give that in their commentary. But I think the idea or the methodology here differs from what you are saying. For example, from the classical perspective till today, covering the head is an obligatory for Muslims, for women, right? But in the classical period, none of the Mufassirin goes to the verse in the Surah of Nur and says that وَلْيَضْرِبْنَ بِخُمُرِهِنَّ عَلَى جُيُوبِهِنَّ, and says that no, this is the evidence of covering head, and so women should cover their head. It is intentionally and from the application of Prophet and his companions started to be a sunnah, and verse in the Surah of Nur is becoming an evidence after that. So I think the application of jihad from the time of Sahaba and companions is started to be performed like this, and the evidence came upon it. So this is the reason why the how can I say, the Mufassirin explain the verses of jihad like this.
Any other comment about? Yes, please. Tell. Remember, you tell your name.
Okay. I am Yusuf Kazım Buyruk. I'm a student at Marmara University. Graduated from Ibrahim University, Political Science Department. So the jihad is also important concept, especially after the 9/11 events. Like many scholars try to explain the essence of jihad, what is its function. For example, Ahmed al-Dawoodi, as far as I remember, he had a book, The Law of Islamic War in Islam. So the Nasr's book was written before the 9/11 or is after the 9/11?
2015.
Maybe, I don't know, maybe you compare the text before the written before the 9/11. Do you see any kind of relevance or differences?
Of course, in the discourse of jihad, defensive discourse is being promoted after 9/11, so more than before that. But the English translations that I showed on the screen, Mahmud Piktil, Yusuf Ali, Abdul Halim, almost all of them before the 9/11. So we cannot say that after 9/11 started this defensive discourse. It is increased, but before that there was also.
All right. So let's turn to Nur Sana's presentation. Science, Quran, rain. Any comment, question? Yeah, please. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. As far as I remember, do not mention the tafsir, modern tafsir, that's relevant to this topic. My question is that, did you see any modern tafsir? I don't see in the classical tafsir mentions it. Did you see any modern tafsir that mention this specific issue, or it is your maybe invention in this field?
It is mentioned also in all tafsirs. For example, in my full paper, I give references to Al-Tabari, also Razi. There are many good interpretations about this, and also in today's closest modern tafsirs, there are, for example, Ibn Ashur, but especially in Al-Tabari and Razi, I saw and I gave references for that. That might be more in old, classical tafsir also, and modern also, probably. But I add some things to it. For example, so in the diagrams, I did the, I gave the details. I opened everything. Yes.
And did you study science too? Is it?
Yes, I'm chemical engineer.
Okay.
My first thesis, and then I studied chemistry.
It makes sense. Yeah, right. Yeah. So I mean, just talking kind of in conversation with your presentation will be interesting. Do you have questions?
I have questions.
Yeah.
Did you propose any similar account of water cycle narration in Bible or Surah tradition or in late after text compared to Quran?
No,
You mean in this context, right? In this context.
Yeah. In this context. In water cycle stuff.
well, I didn't explore about that. I didn't search about that. I don't know. I'm sorry.
As a contribution and also maybe an answer for Yusuf's question, a new published article named Kehf suresinde betimlenen tarımsal ormancılık modeli for the rating towards Fodrib Hümmetine Rajuli Mücavlerli Habibine. In the modern period, there is a new field which is called scientific tafsir, bilimsel tafsir. In the classical period, as I told, they were relying on riwayats and also lexicology. But in the modern period, they say that we can understand, or Quran may say us more than what it was saying to the companion's mind. So this scientific tafsirs, it became more popular in the modern period.
So the limits of the tafsir also
Expanding,
expanding.
But there is another stream who says, Shatibi says that we cannot understand or we cannot add anything to the Quran's ideas which were not being understood by the companions. The most thing from the Quran has been understood by companions. So he says Shariatul Ummiliyi. So this is another.
Yeah, I think another thing is that will be interesting. So the idea is that can you take this Quranic verses as a departure point for inspiration for the science, or vice versa? Can you take science as an independent source to understand the Quran? So it will be interesting, which would be problematic according to some of these scholars. Yes.
Thank you so
Tell us
much
your name, yeah.
for the presentation. My
Tell
name
us-
is Emir Karakaya. I study history as a PhD candidate at University of Wisconsin-Madison. I work on Japanese and Ottoman legal modernization. So
Do you have any Japanese roots?
Oh no.
No, okay. I
From-
wouldn't be
from-
surprised, yeah.
Yeah, from Central Asia.
Yeah, okay.
So my question is coming from a rather an awam perspective, as you're saying, because I have encountered these debates, like the philosophical debates and like the scientific approach to Quran, and as mentioned, like the dangers or like limits of like approaching Quran from a scientific perspective, or like because science can change as well. So were there kind of like any considerations like in these sources that you have used or your during your research that there is a limit? Like did you draw in a line, or were there like philosophical like debates that you have encountered that because it's inspirational, it can, I don't know, like I can even talk about this to my non-Muslim friends, like, as a departure point, or is there a danger in this? And maybe Mohammed Burajam also can jump in. I don't know. I don't wanna instigate both of you against each other.
So your last question?
So, like, is there a way to engage Dawa, like in this kind of like way? Like, is there a guide map for
For non-Muslims?
general Muslims talking about Islam to non-Muslims? Yes.
Yes. For example, even if the Muslim society likes this topic. For example, I talk sometimes with young girls, and I gave a speech about this about Quran, but from the scientific. For example, I talk to them about this, or for example, this Surah Tariq. There are many, for example, names of the surahs even about the nature or natural phenomena, the Najm, Qamar, Tariq. They really like this, and they impressed from this. For example, even in Muslim society, this works. And I agree with the staff, what said. But even also the Prophet says in the in the khutbah that he says, tell this to your friend, maybe he can understand better than you. So we can understand, not we can understand better than Sahaba, of course, okay, but there can be some different and side effects. Not maybe the exact message, but some side effects can be
Explored.
yes.
That's fair enough. Yeah, that's hopefully. But we know that this is actually, again, it's an important conversation, pros and cons, and other things. Anything about Jami's?
I asked you.
Yeah, say it again. What do you say?
I actually have a question.
Yeah, he's here.
Yeah, to Muhammad Tutul. These hadith collections are like, how do they disseminate among the illiterate, like overwhelmingly illiterate public Muslim subjects of the empire? How do they disseminate in like mosques or like around, like other majlis?
We also investigate the manuscript itself and look like at the ownership notes. And we can see that especially Jami's Persian 40 hadith, where in the murals of the sultans and even the Ottoman Turkish translations, where you can see the seats of the sultans too. There are a lot of luxury manuscripts. So the sultans had them, normal people had them, and illiterate people could get these 40 compilations through when people were reading out loud. They were listening, I would guess so.
So memorization was.
Yeah, also, yes. And then there are 9 translations, and 7 of them are saying in their prefaces that they want the readers to memorize it.
Yes. And so we slowly need to wrap up. But any comment about our last presentation? You don't have to. Nice comment, question, reflection.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. So good work.
So there is a tea session in downstairs for networking and